05. The young lady chases off the prince. Rachel was supposed to be confined, yet she was free to do as she pleased. She had brought in her favorite furniture to relax on while she read books, and she was enjoying a leisurely cup of tea. Elliott, who had been staring at this in disbelief, snapped back to his senses. He shouted at her through the bars, "This is a prison, okay? What are you relaxing for?" "I believe you were the ones who told me that a man's home is his castle," Rachel replied. "This is still a bit much though, isn't it? Hey, do something about this, idiot." The guard didn't know how to respond, but of course he didn't. He hesitantly said, "I'm not sure what you expect me to do. I didn't chuck her in prison so she could have a nice vacation. Confiscate all the stuff she's brought in there." Elliott could shout all he wanted, but the reason they'd called him here was because they couldn't do anything about it. "About that, Your Highness. The thing is," the guard muttered. He then explained about the lock. Elliott's jaw dropped again. "What? She shut herself up in there?" The guard thought the way the beautiful, sparkling prince just stared at him with vacant eyes was unsettling, or maybe just stupid. "What shall we do?" he asked, having no idea how to proceed. Well, Elliott wanted to ask the same question. He glanced at Sykes, but Sykes was just standing there, his mouth agog still. He was being extremely unreliable at the moment. "Her brother is smart, so we should have brought him with us," Elliott thought. However, if he were to call for George now, it would prove his own ineptitude. He angrily scratched his head as he tried to come up with an answer, but even after racking his brains, all he could think of was brute force. "Break the lock! We can open the cell if we cut the chains!" Elliott bellowed. He kicked Sykes in the rump. "Hey, call some knights in here. Have them bring tools." "Huh? Oh, yes, sir." The sound of his footsteps as he clumsily raced up the stairs echoed behind him. Elliott laughed sneeringly at Rachel. "You may think you've been very clever, but know that this has worsened my opinion of you. I'll soon return you to the state you were meant to be in. You'll not have so much as a blanket left. Quiver in fear as you imagine the miserable conditions that await you," he declared with a sinister smile. It made him look like nothing more than a petty villain, a fact he was oblivious to. As the prince's former fiancée glanced over her shoulder at him, the corners of her mouth turned up, and she let out a short nasal laugh. "Oh, wouldn't it be nice if that worked out for you?" Sykes returned with 4 or 5 knights in tow. The prince immediately showed them the lock in question. "This is it," Elliott snarled. We're going to cut that?" one of the knights cried out. The rest of them looked similarly exasperated, naturally so. The chain the knight was holding was made of steel about a centimeter thick. That wasn't the diameter of the chain, but of the metal itself. Steel rings with a circumference of 5 or 6 centimeters made up the chain. If someone were to say it was the chain from the castle gate, you'd probably believe them because of how durable it was. And here it was on the door of a mere jail cell. The padlock attached to it was likewise massive. Rachel, with her slender frame, probably couldn't even lift it without using both hands. She'd also carefully positioned the keyhole so that it wasn't visible from outside the bars. "We were told there was a chain that needed cutting, so we brought bolt cutters," one of the knights said, producing a specialized pair of scissors used for cutting iron bolts. They were enormous, and their cutting force was multiplied several times over because of the leverage in their design. And yet, if it were made of lead, we might still be able to cut it, but— "You can't cut it?" Elliott screeched. "It's made of steel, right? And not cast steel, but tempered steel." Just to be sure, 2 of the knights tried cutting it together, but no matter what they did, they couldn't even scratch it. "It's no use," one of the knights admitted. Elliott wasn't having that, though. "If the 2 of you can't do it, then 4 of you try. Your Highness, just because the steel is twice as thick doesn't mean that doubling the number of people will cut through it." "It doesn't. Ugh! Isn't there anything we can do? Is there no other way?" "We did bring a metal saw." The saw was designed for cutting metal, and the knights took turns with it. "Your Highness, we've made a faint scratch." That's all you could do after 30 minutes, huh? At this rate, it would probably take until morning to cut all the way through it." The enormity of the task was starting to dawn on Elliott. The last knight to use the saw showed the prince its blade. And look at this. The blade's gone smoother than a bald man's head. Is there another saw? Elliott asked, sounding desperate. We could search the castle, but I'm not sure there is. Silence fell over the dungeon, until the sound of stifled laughter disrupted it. Elliott turned to see Rachel's shoulders shaking as she read her book. The pretty boy prince's blood raced to his head, and he kicked the cell bars. Hey, just who do you think is fault for this disturbance? Why you, your highness? If you hadn't put me in the dungeon, this disturbance wouldn't have happened. Ugh! Elliott's cheeks burned as he felt everyone looking at him. I'll get her for this. When you got down to it, Rachel was right. He'd started this. He had canceled their engagement, condemned her, and thrown her in the dungeon. Still, Elliott was seething, angry that a woman he'd seen as nothing more than an attractive doll had humiliated him. He couldn't just walk away. Hey, bring a spear and impale this wretch, Elliott demanded. Your Highness? Sykes, the prison guard, and the knights were all shocked. Nevertheless, Elliott kept on shouting. I'm not telling you to kill her. You just need to injure her enough that she can't stay cooped up in there. Make her open the lock and come out on her own. I mean, yes, that would work, but Sykes trailed off as he and the knights glanced at one another. It would be hard to claim that the way the prince broke off his engagement and imprisoned his former fiancée followed official procedures. The palace, which included the dungeon, was the property of the king, and Elliott didn't have the authority to put Rachel in there. It wouldn't be wrong to say he was misappropriating the dungeon for his own ends. They couldn't make any decisions until the king, who was traveling for a royal inspection, had returned. Was it really wise to compound things by injuring the prince's fiancée when the cancellation of their engagement was still not recognized? She hadn't committed any crime, aside from bullying the prince's girlfriend, and that was clearly not a jailable or executable offense. If they were to follow the prince's orders, they might be punished for it, and they didn't think the prince would save them if that happened. As Sykes and the knights stared at one another, silently trying to pass the buck, the prince grew impatient. Hey, what's taking so long? You just have to stab her a little. Elliott stopped midway through his shouting and froze. Sykes cocked his head. The others turned to look at the prince, finding it strange that he trailed off like that. However, when they saw what Elliott was looking at, they all froze as well. Rachel was now standing, and she leveled a crossbow at them with impeccable form. You brought a weapon in there? Elliott hissed. A weapon? In a prison? You have no common sense. Whatever are you saying? This is not a weapon. Huh? It's not. It is a tool for my own self-defense. That's the same thing, you dolt. Rachel's aim was fixed on Elliott for now, but she was holding it in such a way that she could easily adjust to target any of them. The knights had no ranged weapons of their own to fight back. As she saw the men stepping back, Rachel smiled sardonically. Knowing your lack of wit and patience, I was able to see this situation coming. I might add that unlike you, your highness who was too busy chasing girls around town, I had a fondness for hunting with my father and uncle. I've shot my fair share of birds in flight, you know. Rachel flashed them a smile that sent chills rushing down their spines. It was about 3 years ago. The village we were staying in was attacked by bandits. Our soldiers put them down immediately, of course, but I helped and shot down 3 of those animals. In other words, if someone means to do me harm, I will not hesitate to shoot them. Do keep that in mind before you come at me, would you? All Sykes and the rest could think was, oh crap. These days, not even the knights saw active combat, so even if they or the soldiers could fight the enemy, they still needed to mentally prepare themselves before landing the final blow. Killing their opponent with a lucky strike was different from knowing for a fact that the strike would kill. There were only a handful of veteran knights who could take down their opposition so easily. That was the sort of peaceful world they lived in. Yet here was a young lady of high nobility who tested her mettle in battle. If she were to say, I will kill you, then it was probably true. Both Elliott and Sykes could sense that. Rachel cutely cocked her head. If you're not going to do anything to me, then I will allow you idiots to remain there watching. However, if you intend to break into the cell and do me harm, I will exercise my right to defend myself. Okay?" Still smiling, she gestured to the stairs with her chin. "Now, if you've no further business here, I'll ask you to leave." No one there had the presence of mind to realize that the prisoner was ordering them around. The knights did as Rachel instructed, dragging Elliott, who was too stunned to move, with them as they left. It looked as though they were protecting their master as they retreated, but they only did it because they couldn't flee as long as a superior officer was there. Incidentally, the prison guard was the first to hightail it out of there. As Sykes was pushing him up the stairs, Elliott recovered enough to yell, "If you want to be in prison so bad, then you can stay there as long as you like. But I won't be giving you food or anything else, got it? I won't let you out even if you ask, not even if you cry and beg." Though her ex-fiancé was spouting vitriol at her, Rachel opened her book again and yawned. "I do wish you would say that sort of thing to my face." Rachel wasn't expecting a response. By the time she'd finished saying it, the chicken-hearted prince was already long gone. Rachel fell asleep hugging her book, her thoughts racing to the self-indulgent life that awaited her tomorrow. 06. The young lady hears something wonderful. This happened a few weeks before Rachel was thrown in the dungeon. As he was sweeping the porte cochere in the evening, the gate guard for the ducal house of Ferguson saw a carriage approaching. He called inside, saying, "The young lady has returned." The servants hurriedly prepared to welcome her, and the gate guard ran to his post. He just barely opened the gates in time as the carriage bearing the family's crest sped through without slowing. Rachel, the crown prince's fiancée and the future queen of the country, was just now returning from her special lessons at the palace. The servants, led by the butler and the head maid, stood on both sides of the hall, their heads bowed. Rachel walked along, smiling. When the butler asked how her studies went, she gave him a brief self-assessment, then told the head maid she would take dinner 2 hours later, as was her usual routine. Rachel climbed the grand staircase, cheerfully greeting cache of the maids and servants who bowed to her, and headed to her room, where she promptly collapsed on the bed. "Oh, I'm exhausted." Sophia and her other personal maids wordlessly stripped her out of her clothes, ignoring their mistress's complaints. Her lessons at the palace were apparently quite difficult, as could be seen by the way she always collapsed as soon as she got home. For the next 2 hours, Rachel's attendants would nurse her back to health, put her in a bath, and make her presentable for dinner with the Duke. It was an impressive trick, being able to render their mistress completely naked while she was still lying face down. But certainly the maids could do it. Ever since Rachel had begun taking lessons at the palace, they had been hard at work polishing their talents in order to support her. They could easily remove her clothes while she was lying down, so as to lessen the burden on their mistress. There was no one there to ask perfectly logical questions, like, couldn't they just strip her while she's standing? Whatever Rachel chose to do took priority. Once the maids finished undressing her, they laid a thin sheet over Rachel and stepped back. Sophia came forward and used her index fingers to quickly massage Rachel's entire body, from head to foot. Based on the tension in Rachel's muscles, Sophia asked, "It was 4 hours of seated lectures and 2 of dancing, followed by table manners and an inspection of the surrounding area, yes?" Face still buried in her pillow, Rachel deftly managed to shake her head. "No, it was 3 hours of seated lectures, 2 of dancing, 1 of walking, and 2 on how to elegantly watch a play as well as learning the proper manners for a social event attended only by ladies." It all left my shoulders feeling stiff. "How does one elegantly watch a play?" Sophia asked. "You swagger pompously while watching the stage intently with a smile. Or you at least make it look like you are. Those hags made me practice by watching in CMPD stage, while they told me that my posture was bad and that I needed to exude the dignity of a royal. Then they told me my eyes were dead and to make them sparkle with mirth. Surely no one can be passionate about a stage with no performers. From an outsider's perspective, that does sound like a silly lesson. From an insider's perspective, it is silly." At Sophia's signal, another 8 maids surrounded Rachel. Then Sophia comforted Rachel, saying, "Oh, you poor dear, let us do everything we can to soothe your tired body, young mistress. I know I always say this, but do go Casey on me. Certainly, Sophia said, nodding. She looked at the other maids and ordered, Today I want you to focus on the shoulders and the area from her shins to the bottom of her feet. She seems quite stiff, so be thorough. Everyone, hop to it. I said go easy on me, didn't I? Gah! 9 maids, including Sophia, descended on Rachel in unison. They massaged and pressed pressure points with the utmost zeal. Their work was professional too. They used not just the tips of their fingers, but the second joints as well, along with acupressure sticks. They worked on her entire body all at once. As the head personal servant, Sophia had the honor of massaging Rachel's stiffest area, the bottoms of her feet. Hey, ha, gua, ya, ow, that hurts. It was often said that a massage could help you sleep restfully, but this was nothing so tame. It was an absolute assault on Rachel's body. The maids held her down as she thrashed about in pain, loosening up her muscles with all their might. I know I ask this every time, Rachel interjected, but why do you have to do my whole body all at once? And I explain every time that we do not have time to focus on each spot individually. I am sorry, but it has to be this way. You sound like you're enjoying it an awful lot for someone who's sorry. One small thrust from me makes my mistress leap in pain. How could I be anything but amused? Sophia quipped. If you have problems with your work situation, just go on strike, okay? We do this all for you, young mistress. Oh my, your kidneys. Asterisk, aga. You seem quite exhausted, Sophia noted. Gah! If your Yongquan is making you jump this much, then your legs must be quite tense too. Lisa, Mimosa, pay special attention to her Chungshan and Zusanli. Yes, ma'am. Stoop. Gently carrying their half-conscious mistress to the bath, they left her to simmer on low heat. Once her snow-white skin had turned a nice shade of pink, they scooped her out, wrapped her in a bathrobe, and gave her a gentle massage to relieve any muscle pain from the previous one. Once they gave her a cold glass of lemonade to sip on, Rachel finally came back to her senses. Day after day, I attend tiresome lectures on how to act as queen, and then this torment comes along as part of a set. My life is hell. I should never have gotten engaged to the prince. But thanks to that, we are able to enjoy ourselves every day, Sophia remarked. Blow off your stress from work by shopping or eating, would you? That sort of thing is hard on the wallet, and I would prefer to avoid pastimes that make me gain weight. Besides, do you think there is any entertainment greater than a well-to-do young lady's screams? Yes, there must be lots of things. As Rachel settled in, watching the maids prepare the clothes and makeup she would wear to dinner, Sophia pulled out a summary of the day's reports for her. There are many things to note, but one is of great urgency, Sophia informed her. Oh my, what might that be? Have our routes for passing secret messages through the palace been compromised? Rachel took a sip of lemonade, cocking her head as Sophia silently handed her the report. Let's see. E is plotting to end his engagement with Boss. Huh? She paused, sounding dumbfounded. It even says he has already made the decision and is taking concrete steps toward a plan. As Rachel fell silent and stared at the paper, Sophia explained, We reported before that the young daughter of a baron has been moving at the palace recently, and the prince's hangers-on have all become infatuated with her. It seems they have finally resolved to make her queen and are taking steps to remove you from the equation. Unfortunately, young Master George is one of them. As proof, he participated in their meeting, yet he has made no mention of it to the house. Having finished her explanation, Sophia lowered her voice and asked, What shall we do? If Rachel were to move those who were loyal to her, it would be simple to crush the prince's plans, or even the prince himself. The agents that she'd trained held enough power to do so. Well, Rachel returned the paper to Sophia. I think we need to use more code words. It's blatantly obvious who the boss is in this message, isn't it? I am terribly sorry. When we created our code, we obviously had not anticipated a situation such as this. Sophia put the report in her pocket, looked at her mistress with upturned eyes and asked, So what do we do? It's certainly an unexpected development. As Rachel fell silent, glaring at the air in front of her. Sophia continued to watch her quietly. Prince Elliott, the man Sophia's young mistress was to marry, was attractive and popular, especially with the young girls. But there were a number of unpleasant rumors about him. If he had a dark history, that would be one thing, but he merely was prone to incredible blunders. That would not do. Obviously, it was fortunate that he had good looks. But if what was behind that exterior could not measure up to Rachel's prodigious wit, their married life would quickly deteriorate. It wasn't uncommon for petty nobles to be in a loveless marriage, maintained only for appearances. But if the couple in question were the future king and queen of the country, well, you didn't have to be one of Rachel's servants to see the danger there. If he were a simpleton who would do everything Rachel told him, things would still be manageable. But Elliott's incompetence was unacceptable. People said that, despite his ineptness, he was exceptionally prideful. If Rachel were to tell him to do this or that, he was bound to get indignant and oppose her on everything, even though he had no talent. In fact, from what Rachel and her agents who'd infiltrated the palace had told her, the slovenly prince did not get along with Rachel because of her irreproachable conduct. When Rachel told him to get his act together, he would get annoyed and refuse to listen to a word she said. To think a mere prince would defy the young mistress. Sophia felt a murderous rage for this impertinent royal who really ought to have known his place. As soon as Rachel gave her permission, she planned to tear that stupid, talentless, cheating, senseless, garbage prince limb from limb. Sophia, by the way, had never met Elliott. Her estimate of his worth was completely based on rumors. While she tried to be impartial, when something was to the disadvantage of her young mistress, Sophia tended to lose her head, but only just a little. She thought it was a cute foible of hers. Rachel sat her empty glass down and turned to face Sophia. So what precisely do they intend to do? They plan to condemn you at the party next month that he opens the season of social events. And after declaring your engagement null and void, the Baroness's daughter will take your place. That makes sense, Rachel mused. Only the young nobles will be there. He won't have to worry about our parents or influential politicians stepping in to stop him. This must have been George's idea. You could tell? Rachel shrugged. Prince Elliott would just come to tell me after he made up his mind, never bothering to lay the groundwork. He is quite the idiot, Sophia commented. They do say that all of his genes went exclusively to his good looks, leaving none for his brain. Anyway, both the king and queen will be away performing an inspection of the southern mining region and holding a top-level conference with the leaders of a principality. The timing was well chosen, at least for something George came up with. Could there be another schemer? His Highness's other hangers-on include one man with muscles for brains who is only interested in counting calories, and 7 or 8 yes-men who I've never been able to tell apart. Even if you were not involved, that lineup would still leave one concerned for the kingdom's future. That must be why His Majesty didn't want him to assume power. As Rachel rose from the sofa, she let her bathrobe fall to the ground. The maids saw her skin was no longer flushed and began dressing her in fresh clothes. Now, Sophia, if I am condemned at this party and the Baron's young daughter takes my place as the prince's fiancée, what does His Highness intend to do with me after that? He's planning to excoriate me in public, so he won't have many knifed when no one is around, right? These children think their plan is going to work, so I doubt they have thought it through that far. They intend to force you to admit to bullying the Baron's daughter and apologize. Then, when His Majesty returns, they will drag you before him and have you confess your crimes so that the change of fiancés goes smoothly. That seems to be their plan. Sloughing off the responsibility of dealing with me to my father and His Majesty. Wait, so they haven't thought that far ahead? Precisely, Sophia confirmed. Rachel, now dressed in a simple dress for wearing around the house, sat down on a stool. The maids responsible for her makeup draped a scarf around her neck and began powdering her face. Rachel preferred light makeup, so they only used a little. They soon traded the powder puffs for brushes and began applying lipstick. There's about a week between the party and His Majesty's return, right? Rachel asked. Hasn't it occurred to them that even if I were to meekly apologize, I might recant once I returned home? I cannot imagine you ever so meekly apologizing, young mistress. But They must be assuming that if they make a big enough show of denouncing you in front of everyone at the party, there will be no way to overturn that fact. You can't imagine it? I'll have you know I'm famous at court for being a meek and modest young lady. A wolf is a wolf even if it does not howl. I can only laugh at how dim all the members of polite society are. Recalling one piece of information she had thus far neglected to tell her mistress, who seemed upset for some reason, Sophia reported, "Oh, right. In the event you defiantly refuse to admit your crimes, they intend to throw you in the dungeon until you come crying to them." Rachel stared blankly at her. The dungeon? Yes, they intend to confine you in the dungeon. There's one of those in the palace? Rachel's surprise was understandable. Something so dark as a palace dungeon seemed out of place in this easygoing, peaceful kingdom. It wasn't as though nobles never committed crimes, but you never heard of them being imprisoned inside the palace. I confirmed it for myself after receiving this information. The building facing the rear garden, which is used for storage as well as emergency lodging for courtiers, contains a prison that is half underground. It seems to have been built by the king 7 generations ago so that he could torment traitors. It was a relic from the days of bloody strife at court. In other words, that means it's from about a century ago, right? Is it still usable? Rachel asked. The room has nothing but stone walls and iron bars. All of the interior has been removed, but it seems the running water has been maintained. Or rather, it just works on its own still. On very rare occasions, an official will come around to check the facilities. At this point, the man in charge of patrolling the area must still have been enjoying a happy, ordinary life. They can't have many people to put in there, Rachel noted. I suppose they must have a lot of extra space in the castle. Looking at the report Sophia had given her, Rachel was shocked by the size of the dungeon sketched there. If the dimensions were to be believed, the 2 rooms together were about the size of a tennis court. The dungeon was intended for imprisoning important members of the nobility, Sophia explained. So perhaps they were generous in their estimates of required living space. Perhaps the walls and pillars were built to conform with the shape of the floors above. It wasn't clear what had caught Rachel's attention, but she began pacing as she stared at the paper. The maid in charge of accessories followed behind her, trying to get the necklace around her neck. Rachel stopped. The maid hurriedly put her jewelry on. Sophia, the party in question is 3 weeks from now, right? Yes, that is correct. Sophia cocked her head. She was sure that Rachel was about to crush the garbage prince's plans. So what did this have to do with the dungeon? Could you show me the report on the goods the Black Cat Company is dealing in? Huh? Yes, young mistress. Sophia was becoming less and less sure of what her mistress was talking about. The Black Cat Company was a front for the Black Cats of the Night, a group of operatives that Rachel maintained for herself, separate from those of the ducal house. Using the business of domestic and foreign trade as a cover, the Black Cat Company raised funds for their activities and maintained contact with an intelligence network that operated everywhere. Of course, even if the company was a front, Rachel had built the organization. They handled their business properly. Rachel looked through the list of recent products, stopping to carefully peruse some pages. She normally kept her expression to a careful facade, but she broke out into a genuine grin as she said, "This is good." Huh? What is? Sophia. Yes, young mistress. If my engagement ends at the party, then I'll no longer be the next queen, correct? Yes, that is true. But I cannot see His Majesty accepting it. I have never met the man myself, but surely he cannot be as stupid as his son. That was some serious laze there, Miss Sophia, Rachel thought. Not that she minded. That's not a problem, Rachel replied. He won't be at the party, after all. No, there wouldn't be anyone there to stop Prince Elliott. When he breaks off our engagement at the party, I'll deny his accusations. Sophia nodded. Right. Then I'll get him to chuck me in the dungeon. You will get him to. Rachel held up the manifest of goods and proudly declared, I'm going on an indefinite vacation. Sophia and the maids were always in perfect sync with Rachel, but every last one of them froze. Sophia was the first to regain her senses enough to speak. Young mistress, I am not sure what you mean by that. Oh my, Sophia, If even you don't understand, then nobody can. Yes, of that you can be certain. Rachel gleefully flicked the list with her finger. Once my engagement to His Highness is over, I'll no longer be his fiancée. Do you follow me so far? Yes. Sophia and the other maids nodded, so Rachel continued. That means I'll no longer be the next queen, so I'll no longer be required to take the lessons to become one. Yes, I suppose so, Sophia agreed. As a result, I will have free time. That does follow, yes. The maids looked at one another, sensing something ominous. So I think I'll use all the time I didn't have thanks to those lessons to take it easy and indulge in my hobbies. I understand your reasoning now, Sophia acknowledged. What do you mean, my reasoning? Rachel asked, puffing out her cheeks. On behalf of the maids, Sophia started working through Rachel's logic. I understand that you want to use the free time generated by your broken engagement to take a vacation. Yes, Rachel confirmed. However, I do not see the connection between that and the dungeon. Could you not just go along with things, then hurry back to the mansion and leave for somewhere more picturesque? Now, Sophia, that just won't do. Rachel lightly poked Sophia on the forehead, like you might do to a child who got a failing grade. If I don't put everything into my escape attempt, those disgusting old hags will drag me back here in no time. Sophia, who had been speechless, now recovered. In short, your goal is to use imprisonment as an excuse to escape from Duchess Somerset and your other tutor's lessons then? Yep. Rachel raised both arms in the air and spun around. She seemed absolutely delighted. Isn't it great? Not only will my engagement to that ignoramus be canceled, and he'll be the one responsible for it, but I also get to escape Duchess Somerset and the hags for a vacation where I don't have to do anything. It's wonderful. Sadly for Rachel, who was quite happy with her plan, there was a hole in... Sophia shook her head. Young mistress, when His Majesty returns, that garbage prince's nonsense will all be swept away. But even before that, there is no way that a good-for-nothing like His Majesty could possibly stand up to Duchess Somerset and the other ladies of the court. Is there? Sophia, you really shouldn't talk about His Majesty like that in public, okay? Rachel chided. Ignoring that shot from Rachel, Sophia continued. What I am saying is that even if you are thrown in prison, they will haul you back out the next day. This did nothing to change Rachel's smile. Well, I'll just have to be sure that they can't haul me out then. Come again? There was no uncertainty in Rachel's eyes as she explained, I just have to lock the prison from the inside. From the inside? That's right. Was it even a prison anymore if the lock was on the inside? Now that that's settled, it's time to prepare for a fun vacation. A fun vacation? Sophia muttered. It seemed that Rachel had a different idea of what prison was like than most people. Oh, now, if we assume I'll be in there for longer, say 3 months, I'll need preserved foods and other things to last me that long. There's a lot of different types of canned goods now, you know? Let's have the Black Cat Company find me some good stuff. We'll prepare in advance by bringing things in little by little so as not to alert the prison guard, and we'll clean up the cell. We'll need to research ways to keep in contact and evade palace security too. It's indoors, so I won't need a tent. But what should I do for bedding? Oh, there's so little time and so much to get ready. Rachel's heart raced with excitement, as if she were preparing for a camping trip. Sophia and the other maids looked at one another, seeing how much fun their mistress was having. But when they realized Rachel was serious, they all bowed their heads in unison. Understood, Sophia stated. For Sophia and the other maids, Rachel always came first. As far as they were concerned, whatever the young mistress decided, even if it was out of step with the world around her, was right. If she was running away from the harsh reality of her lessons as future queen, then so long as she was enjoying herself, that was good enough for them. In that case, young mistress, as the dungeon is underground, we will need to prepare a large number of lights and some insect repellent. I also think you should bring more than the minimum amount of food. You'll want sweets and tea too, won't you? If you can't walk around, then you should bring along novels and collections of poetry. Oh my, you're all getting into this too, Rachel exclaimed. Not one of them tried to stop Rachel as her fun vacation plan got underway. In the dining hall, "Hey, what's taking Rachel so long?" the Duke asked. It's already been 4 hours since she came home. She said it would be 2 hours. I'm hungry, the Duke grumbled.